Despite the intense intro, it's the Friday show where we kick back and have some fun on the BWI Daily Edition. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr, and my most casual polo almost wore a t-shirt today. Ryan Snyder, who joins me today, recruiting insider, talking about recruiting.
Casual Friday. I'm always dressed to impress on the BWI Daily. So
Yes.
Lots of recruiting to talk about this week, though, man. So let's get into it. We'll save our wardrobe talk for another day.
Yeah, there is a top 5 today. We'll be getting to the defensive hot boards for 2023 and update. A lot of familiar names we've talked about. I feel like there's some interesting things there too with the secondary. We'll get to all of that later. And of course, visits are coming up this weekend, so we're previewing all of that today on the BWI Daily Edition. And we're going to start with that top 5. But before we get to that, make sure you subscribe to Blue White Illustrated so you don't miss anything from BWI, like our video breakdowns of Pro Day, which came out yesterday and Thursday, our video breakdowns of practice, getting you some insight and information from Penn State spring ball, and of course, everything else here on the Daily Edition and the recruiting show, which Ryan is a part of on Tuesdays. A lot of great content. It's spring football. Things are happening. Hit subscribe and the notification button so you don't miss anything. BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, also a great place to sign up. It's $1 for 12 months of access, so you get the inside stuff from Ryan before anyone else knows it. Now, one thing that you had, and we knew this was kind of coming because Treyaun Webb has been really a lot of positive signs between him and Penn State. He released his top 5, so tell us about the 4-star running back and what happened this afternoon for the Nittany Lions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so of course he dropped the top 5 today, which I think anyone who's been following his recruitment, I don't think it's too much of a surprise. Penn State, we've known that they were firmly in the mix with the Florida running back, and he added that South Carolina, Florida, Tennessee, and Baylor are also in the mix. So what's interesting about that, though, one thing I picked up on, though, is he also has an official visit set to Arkansas, I believe, or he was supposed to for June 17th. So is that visit happening still? That's kind of one thing we need to figure out there. But we do know Penn State's going to get an official visit, right? They are set for June 11th. South Carolina is set for an official visit on June 24th. And then Baylor is supposed to be June 4th. So what happens there with the other two schools, we'll see. Tennessee, I assume they'll get one at some point. Maybe they'll replace Arkansas. I mean, that would make sense, right?
Right.
And of course, he lives, I don't know, how far is Jacksonville from Gainesville? Like an hour or so? I don't think it's that far.
You know the geography of Florida better than I do. I was there when I was like 11 for a trip and to go to Disney World, and that's the last time I've been to Florida.
Yeah. I know it's, they're both kind of more northern Florida, so I think it's about an hour or so, maybe a little bit longer. But I think looking at this list and just from my conversations with them, I do generally believe all 5 schools have a chance. I would say he's been very active in visiting South Carolina. So clearly Shane Beamer and his staff are doing a good job there. And then, of course, the new staff at Florida seems to be really, I don't want to say moving up his list, but, grabbing his attention. So they kind of grab my eye a little bit. Maybe Penn State's probably sit behind those two at the moment. But I do really believe that these upcoming visits will be how he sorts out where he ends up. So, of course, he was committed previously. I believe it was Georgia, and I think it was Oklahoma. I believe those were the 2 schools he was committed to previously. So he's already bounced around a little bit. Of course, Oklahoma had a big change in their staff, so I don't really hold that one against them too much.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
we will see. So I'm just getting him up here for that official visit, man. That's kind of the next thing that we will really know where Penn State stands after that. Of course, Penn State offered London Montgomery too, the Scranton prospect who earned a 4-star rating from 1-3, and those two really firmly feel like they're top running backs at the moment. Dalen Smothers is still in the mix. Mark Fletcher's still in the mix. I will be watching Mark Fletcher for a visit maybe here soon. A few of his American Heritage teammates have made it clear that they're planning to come up here in a week or two. So we'll see if Mark Fletcher makes that trip with them. But for the most part, London Montgomery, Treyon Webb, they feel like the two that I'm focused on the most. And for the most part, again, I think we're going to just see one running back in this class. But, I mean, two's always possible, especially if, like, they really want both. But to me, just when I look across the landscape and I see their needs at other positions, one makes the most sense, I think.
Yeah, and very different players as well. I know 5'10", 160, 170 is London Montgomery, and then over 6 feet tall, bigger back in Treyon Webb, who's, announcing his top 5. One thing I want to ask you about that top 5, and this is something that you brought up on the recruiting show on Tuesday, that you mentioned NIL is going to have an impact on the second half of this class for Penn State.
Yep.
He's going to Tennessee. Tennessee just got a 5-star quarterback. We also heard that there is a player that has a six-figure
It's Nico.
NIL deal, right?
We can stop reading around the bush on that one. I mean,
Right.
I appreciate Stuart Mandel, the way he handled that, because the young man hasn't committed yet. But when he put out that story, but I think the whole world knows it's Nico. I'm not even going to pronounce his last name. I don't know how to do it, but I think anyone who follows recruiting knows what I'm talking about by now. But
so if you get Treyaun Webb going to Tennessee, who's got a huge NIL collective, is that a concern? Is this one of those areas where that might crop up?
Oh yeah, could be. Absolutely. I'd be lying if I said I've talked to Treyon extensively about how important that stuff is. And I think actually a lot of guys don't really understand the impact of it until they get it thrown in their face, right? So maybe when he goes to Tennessee or Florida or South Carolina or any of these Southern schools, because let's be honest, these SEC schools are on a different level right now with NIL. And they might always be on a different level when it comes to those collectives. So that's really going to be the thing I think a lot of us in my industry, at least, are watching closely in the coming years. But I don't know exactly where Treyon stands with that stuff and how important it is to him. But make no mistake, Tennessee has absolutely one of the biggest collectives out there. And it makes sense, too, right? Like, how hungry is Tennessee's fan base? They are one of the most, hungry for success fan bases out there, considering where they were 20 years ago and how rocky it's been, no pun intended, Rocky Top, of course, how rocky it's been over the last, 10 or so years. So
they have not been relevant. Their best years, you hear, Tennessee might challenge, and then they go 8-4. And that's,
like
coming
last year.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and of course, Texas A&M too is like the other one, and that makes complete sense too, right? They were kind of behind Texas and Oklahoma for all those years. They get in the SEC, they get that awesome new stadium, and now all of that hype and excitement around that fan base is creating another massive collective. So, only time is going to tell. I really think in a year or two from now, we'll have it'll be much more in the open, right? Like many more recruits are going to be talking about this stuff. But right now, whenever I ask about it, it still kind of feels like everybody's like scared to talk about it a little bit, even though it's, totally legal and free game now, but it's coming. It's definitely coming.
Yeah, I mentioned this on the Daily Edition yesterday, talking with Nate Bauer about this stuff. Is that the tidal wave is coming, but you can already feel the tremors because again, things you brought up, Gabriel and Grayson Murphy, they've got an NIL deal from UCLA. So is that going to factor into whether or not they decide, we'll go to Penn State and make our money in the league? Because ultimately, and this is I think the important part, is right now, the money is still in the NFL. That's where you're seeing, like, unless you're getting these crazy outlier contracts, the money's in the NFL. So having your eye on that prize is still the priority for athletes. But will it change to where you're getting paid maybe not at NFL levels, but close? That might have the impact down the line that we're talking about. So we'll see. And that's just a vague throw a stone in the pond sort of prediction when it comes to that stuff. Anything else on?
Let me jump in on that real quick.
Sure,
let me jump in on that, because it is. You're right. The big money, of course, that still is right. So it's getting to the NFL. That should still be the goal. But if you get at 18, 19, 20 years old, if you get a $400,000, are able to amass some sort of thing for $400,000, right? And you invest that correctly, and you have good people around you who don't let you waste it down at Champs one night or whatever it is, waste it on your girlfriend you're trying to impress from Nittany Dorm or whatever. Okay, I'm trying to think of too many local things here. But my point is, like, that's still good money that that can set you up for whatever, starting a business or like, God, I wish I had $400,000 when I was just getting out of school. I mean.
Most people have negative money because of their student loans. They have negative 200,000.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I just, that is definitely still the goal. But I still think that as this grows and we, like, hundreds of thousands of dollars is still massive money that, you can have fun with some of that at your age, and all these kids will have fun with it to some degree. But if you invest it right, you have good parents around you, you have good coaches and good people around you who point you in the right directions, there's still a lot you can do with that. And of course, look at the numbers. How many guys make it to the NFL, right? Isn't it like 1% or something like that? It's incredibly small. So if you just understand the numbers and you understand what's being given to you, that's why I still think that even hundreds of thousands of dollars is going to have a massive impact on where these guys end up, because again, it just, if you have the right structure and the belief of what you can do with that, why wouldn't it? Like
Yep.
I grew up a Penn State season ticket holder my whole life, right? Like, obviously, if I would have been if I would have had the size, I would have loved to play football for Penn State. But if I was an athlete now coming through this, right, and I'm getting maybe $100,000 for Penn State or $300,000 to go to Pitt, I shouldn't probably use Pitt in that example. That was a bad example. But
Right.
I'm just saying, like, it's not going to make you think,
Yeah.
like, I have good family around me. I know that if I was in those positions, what my parents would be telling me to do, it's take
Yeah.
that money, invest it right, be smart, still go on and do everything you can to get to the NFL, but understand the opportunity that's been given to you. And I think a lot of Penn State fans, yes, let's not use Pitt or Maryland or Rutgers example,
West
or Ohio
Virginia?
State, sorry.
How about that?
Yeah, yeah.
Close
Well,
enough.
they're about to play them next year, right? So,
yeah.
Penn State fans might hate them too. But my point is just, it's serious money that you can do a lot with. So I would hope, and I think if we're going to see it change the landscape, we're going to see players that normally would have ended up at Penn State end up at Maryland because of it, and then vice versa too. There's going to be other schools, ways it benefits Penn State as well. Guys that maybe would have went to Ohio State, but because they were so important to Penn State, they somehow got a little extra money out of it, and they come to Happy Valley instead. So it should mix some things up. And then you add in the playoff too.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a whole nother story, but you add in the 16-team playoff and how that should help with recruiting. Man, I'm really excited about where we're going for college football. If you cannot tell from my 4-minute spiel right there, go on.
Shout out to Carl Nassib for compound interest on the BWI Daily Edition. That's what you get everything here. You get recruiting information, you get some financial information. And by the way, if you haven't seen Carl Nassib explaining compound interest to his defensive line teammates in Oakland, absolutely go check it out, because first off, it's informative. Secondly, it's hilarious. So check that out. It's a great video. So visitor lists, speaking of Penn State players, maybe in the future, guys that are going to determine the fate of Penn State one way or another at some point. This is another open weekend for visitors, and players are coming to campus. So who are the names to know that Penn State fans should be aware of starting today on Friday as we're recording, but going throughout the weekend?
Yeah, so majority of guys will be up here tomorrow. I wouldn't be surprised if a few get in here tonight, but this is really a visitor list for tomorrow for the most part. For Saturday, of course, like some of you are going to be listening to this on Saturday. I should think of that. But right now we're looking at around 8 or 9 scholarship guys, and that doesn't include committed guys. So we know Tyrese Mills, for example, is going to be on campus. Hunter Norsad is expected to come down from Cornell, which is always a good thing. Drew Shelton, Alex Birchmeyer, Anthony Donko, Cooper Cousins, all of those guys are committed already, and they're expected to be here. And it's always good, right? Keep your commits always coming on campus. That's never a bad thing. But when I look at the rest of the uncommitted players, there's a handful of guys that definitely grab my attention. I'm looking at Cameron Cook, for example. He actually just confirmed, like, as we were about to go on air here. So this is a pretty recent one here. He's a 4-star prospect by On3, and ended in the On3 consensus. Excuse me. Pretty good offer sheet too, man. Texas, USC, Oregon. Utah's another one. Oklahoma hasn't offered yet, but they're showing serious interest. He's a running back out of Stony Point in Round Rock, Texas. So interesting when Penn State's getting guys from Texas to come on campus, because he's not the only one either. We have Kyle Parker as well, wide receiver out of Luca, Texas. I have no idea where Luca, Texas is, if I'm being honest with you. But another solid offer sheet. Texas has come on board here recently. They seem to be really, of course, kid from Texas offers. It would make sense that they're making major moves. Louisville, he's visited. Arkansas, he's visited. And he's a wide receiver prospect. Right now, he's a 4-star player, just inside the On3 300. We have him at 5'11", 175 pounds. So interesting that Penn State's getting 2 guys from Texas this weekend for unofficial visits, because that's not something we see very often. T. Frank, you're learning the recruiting landscape, but I think you even know that that's not something we see very much.
Yeah, the price of a plane ticket and the price of lodging when you're not when somebody else isn't paying for the bill, you got to really want to go from Texas to State College or California. There's a couple guys I know that are not just the class of 23, but beyond as well, where there's guys from California coming. So again, you got to really want to be here if you're making about as long of a flight as you can make in the continental United States.
Yeah, yeah, that's that one grabs my attention too. Kobe Boykin is a 2024 prospect. We have him at 5'8", 175. He's from Orange, California, and he's already committed to Utah. And yet he's going to come out here, which is interesting, right?
Yeah.
Sophomore. Oh, of course, Utah is your team too. I forgot about that.
I won't tell the
Your wife's team.
in-laws.
Yeah, yeah. Don't tell the in-laws about that. But
They'll be a
what's
little
even
upset.
more interesting? Oh, nice. I like it. So so yeah, obviously that's interesting. I'll be curious to see how the visit goes. Penn State only offered him a couple weeks ago, and he has a solid offer sheet as well. Of course, he's committed to Utah, but Arizona, Colorado, Pitt. There are a few of the schools who have offered. LSU's showing some serious interest in him too. I'll be curious to see what happens there. But here's the more interesting one to me. 2025, yes, 2025 player who's already committed to USC is going to be on campus this weekend, in Aaron White. So here's the thing. I was looking at his timeline. He committed to USC September 25th, 2021. So, I mean, I haven't looked at Orange's games last year, but I'm pretty sure he committed like 3 games into his high school career, maybe 4 games into his high school career. I mean, that's, I've heard about 8th graders getting offers, but I don't know. I've seen too many freshmen commit like before they've, even like can grow a beard or anything,
Right.
what I
They
mean?
haven't
Like,
even
it's
put
like
up their first highlight film, probably. Like, they're still
yeah,
getting the
yeah.
cut-ups.
Wild.
Yeah.
So that's always interesting to me. But I mean, I will say with White, I mean, his offer sheet is stacked. USC, of course, is offered, right? He's committed.
Mm-hmm.
Georgia, Oklahoma, Michigan, Oregon, Ole Miss, Utah, of course. They offered Boykin, who, by the way, Boykin is his cousin, so they're
Mm-hmm.
coming together. That's kind of, probably should explain that from the top, but Colorado, Boston College, Washington. There's a bunch of others, but White is clearly going to be a heck of a player. We have him as an athlete right now, 6'1", 150, 6'1", 150. I mean, he's obviously pretty young, of course,
Yeah.
but yeah, just interesting, man. That we that's not something you see often. Guys coming from Texas for unofficials and coming from California for unofficials, and here we have both in the same weekend. So
Yeah.
those will certainly be a few of the guys that I'm really kind of focused on. There's a couple other names I'll mention quick. Michael Van Buren is going to be one of a few St. Francis Academy players coming up. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
Van Buren is a quarterback prospect. I think anyone who remembers watching was what was it, St. Francis versus De La Salle, I want to say. We were watching who was the lineman who committed to Penn State and
Andre
switched to
Roy.
Maryland? Andre Roy, thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. Yeah.
We were all watching Andre Roy that night, and Michael Van Buren, I believe that was his first game that night, and he played really well. So he's a player that a lot of schools have jumped on since then. Michigan, Penn State, West Virginia, Virginia Tech, to name a few. And he's visited a few of those schools already. This will actually be his second trip back to Penn State. And he'll have a few teammates with him. I'll be curious to see how that plays out. One other guy I really do want to mention.
I want to just make a note. He'll have a few teammates from St. Francis. So, once again,
yeah,
St. Francis and the Penn State saga. We'll see how that goes.
You said it, not me.
Well, I feel like I was due. I know you've mentioned it. Greg's mentioned it. I feel like I needed to get my swing in on that pitch.
Yeah, I mean, it's strange. Like the Andre Roy thing was strange. Like that felt like it was clearly staged to some degree, especially when you add in what his teammate did, of course. But I mean, there's been other years too, though, where like I know Messiah and a few of the guys out there. Like I think they're great people. I don't think there's like any conspiracy thing to it. It's just been really strange that such an awesome program there has still not gotten one player to Penn State. So we'll figure it out with time. But Jalen McLean, one other player I wanted to mention, we'll switch to New Jersey. He's a 2024 safety prospect, and I think this will be Jalen's first visit to Penn State. I'm pretty sure it is. He's been to Rutgers a couple times, and still kind of getting his offers all together. Texas A&M offered, Georgia offered, South Carolina, Ole Miss, a few others, Boston College, Syracuse. But the one thing I want to say with McLean, though, is he's just somebody that people in Nash have consistently spoken very highly of. I think he's going to be a pretty important prospect for Penn State. Again, he's a 2024 player. We have him at 6 foot 180 out of Seton Hall Prep in West Orange, New Jersey. So it's a pretty good list this weekend. Like I said, we got about 8 or 9 uncommitted scholarship guys, a handful of signees, a handful of others who have committed already. We're watching a few others who, we're watching to see if they're visiting, but just haven't heard back from yet. But this would be their first pretty big visit weekend for the spring.
Is it intentional to bring guys like Cooper Cousins in the class of 24 and Alex Birchmeyer in the class of 23 in on a weekend where you're bringing guys that you want to kind of put a good word in the ear of these guys? And even when you're looking at guys in 2025, I know there's some special circumstances with Aaron White, but is that intentional to have that mix of committed and uncommitted guys, or is that just the process of recruiting?
Yeah. Penn State wants them on campus as much as they can get them, right?
Gotcha.
So I don't really like, for example, when we get to official visits in June, like I could see them scheduling guys around Alex Birchmeyer's official visit, right? Like that
Right.
there are ways that they will try and do that, especially with official visits, because they kind of schedule those moments. But for the most part, man, it's just about getting quality guys on campus as much as you can. And then of course, when you can sprinkle in your committed guys there to hang out with them, it's good. Now there are other times too where said committed player is close with this, top uncommitted player. And then I think the staff pushes a little harder for it. But for this weekend, one thing I will note with this weekend, of course, is it's coaches clinic, so I wouldn't be surprised if a few of the committed guys are, coming down with their coaches. Like, for example, I think the Lackawanna guys will be here. So that's why, Tyrese Mills is probably coming down. But, yeah, it's really just about getting your committed players on campus whenever you can. And, if it falls out on weekends where there's a lot of other guys, all the better.
Of course, we got athletes from Texas and California coming this weekend, and 44 and rainy tomorrow is the forecast. So,
oh, really?
State College does not disappoint once again. It was beautiful yesterday. Pro Day was amazing, and then cold today, rainy tomorrow, and cold as well. So,
of course, Pro Day was inside as well. That was the one thing I really noticed. When you walk out, you're like, oh my God, it's beautiful out here.
Yeah. So, anything else on visitors this weekend, or do you want to jump to the hot boards?
I think that's pretty much it. I mean, we hit on pretty much all the scholarship guys there. So, I think hot boards is the way to go. Let's go on to that.
So we talk about Treyon Webb, and I know that it's really early in the cycle, and there's still a lot of scholarships available, but especially defensive tackle. And I want to start at defensive tackle because this seems to be such a thick, deep group of players for Penn State that they seem to have good momentum with. So when it comes to the players that we're going to talk about today, who do you think Penn State has the best situation with, and who are the guys that are most important to them in this cycle?
Yeah, so with defensive tackle, I mean, I think a lot of fans know all about Jason Moore right now, right? The math of defensive tackle, incredibly important. We know Notre Dame is firmly in the mix there, and he's got some other trips probably lined up to Michigan. He said Ohio State. He also mentioned LSU to me previously. I think he's incredibly important. Will Penn State land him? We'll see. I think Notre Dame is a serious player there, and the Irish are probably going to get him on campus here again for a second time here over the next month or so. Of course, Penn State does hold the edge right now as far as visits, so that's a good thing to know with him coming for a game back during the season, and then of course he came in January for a trip as well. Derek LeBlanc in Kissimmee, Florida seems like a pretty important player. He has a top 7 right now of Clemson, Florida, Miami, Ohio State, Oklahoma, Penn State, and UCF. Yeah, it's going to be hard to land him, though.
Yeah.
He's going to come back for an official visit, and those official visits will be incredibly important, right? So let's see how that plays out. But right now, man, it feels like it's going to be hard to beat out the Florida schools with him. Yeah. But we'll see. I think Oklahoma's a serious player, too.
That was a player, too, that Penn State had good momentum with during the season. I remember you mentioning him and his teammate John Walker. Is just your sense that it's cooled a little bit, or just that there's been new developments?
No, I mean, I think like sometimes what's hard with I bring up momentum because I talk to people and they're maybe they're coming off a visit and they're talking all the time, so they feel good about that stuff. But like, just stuff has to play out. Like when they go on to visit 7 more schools in 11 weeks, like it's like, okay, well, yeah, he came and visited Penn State and that was good, but I mean. Like LeBlanc has taken like 20 some visits already. Like he's all over the place. So yeah, like there's momentum and it's good that he's coming to Penn State, but I'm looking at it right now, 24. He's taken 24 visits. Like that's a lot. That's up there probably in the 90th percentile of the 2023 guys. So it's just there's ebbs and flows, and as more schools come into the mix, you can only talk to other schools as much. I mean, I'm so confident in saying that he talks to Penn State regularly. He's going to come back to Penn State, and Penn State's in the mix. I just man, it's just gonna be hard to land him. He's a stud of a player, and all these top schools are after him. But you also mentioned John Walker.
Yep.
I think it's gonna be similar with Walker. It's gonna be hard to land. The guy I really think would hesitate maybe has one of the better chances with is Justin Benton out of Covington, Georgia, Newton High School. I think he's a player they have a real chance with, and I'd also add Will Norman to that as well, out of IMG Academy. Of course, he's from Camden
Mm-hmm.
originally, but now he's playing at IMG. But there's those three kind of make the most sense. But like Norman's going to take a bunch more visits. I think the Camden connection is good, staying close to home. I think that'll be good, but he's also at IMG, right? So he's going to
Right.
have a ton of schools after him. He can visit Florida and some other schools a lot easier. So that's going to be tough to kind of see how it all plays out. I mean, Benton's definitely coming back here in the near future. And that's a player who Penn State sources just continuously rave about. So right now, I feel like Benton out of this list might be the most realistic. Now, of
Mm-hmm.
course, I should actually add Sadir Mitchell and DJ Samuels to that mix as well. Of course, they're both North Jersey prospects from Bergen Catholic. I mean, Sadir's really picking up right now, man. He's got he's going on visits to Georgia, Auburn, A&M, Texas, Miami. Like there's some massive SEC schools pushing for Sadir recently. Just be kind of curious to see how that impacts him. But he's always been pretty high on Penn State. But I guess to wrap this up here, because I'm kind of going on about the D tackle board, but it's a very deep board.
Yeah.
I would think that Justin Benton feels like the most realistic at the moment as far as the guys I think they really, really want. And then Jason Moore kind of still remains the diamond, the guy that they're really after. Notre Dame is going to be a serious player there. And I think he just needs to visit more schools is the thing with Jason. Like he's been to Notre
Yeah.
Dame, been to Penn State, been to Maryland. But man, he has so many other offers. Let's see some other schools and then try and make predictions.
So I think with teammates like LeBlanc and Walker, fans might think that could be a package deal. I know they probably came up and visited together when they did come to visit. Is that unfair to say that is not a reality or a realistic thing, or is that something that you could that could entice them to both choose Penn State?
Um, I don't think they're going to be a package deal.
Gotcha.
No, I think Walker's like coveted. I think LeBlanc is incredibly highly coveted, and
Yes.
and he's going to have kind of maybe just a few more options that Walker might not have. But I mean, it's always possible in the end. But right now, I don't think they're headed for that course. No.
Nicholas Harbor is the Jason Moore of the defensive end position. I would hazard to say. What's any update on him? He seems to be very quiet, other than I think he took a visit to Maryland recently. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. I think a few guys were up there on a Thursday. It looked like a Maryland themed kind of visit because there was a lot of top players in Maryland that weekend. Not really a ton on Nicholas. Of course, he's running track, so like that's kind of keep him, from really visiting a ton of schools. So I really don't have a whole lot I can share with him at the moment. I mean, I think he will definitely get back to Penn State here. Probably, I don't know. It depends on his track schedule, right? I mean, that's probably going to be the biggest thing that impacts him there. But I mean, he'll definitely get back to Penn State by the summertime. Whether he gets here in the spring is kind of hard to tell. But I think Penn State will kind of be top 5 with him, maybe. But do I think he's going to end up here? Probably not. I still think
Right.
the SEC schools are probably going to get him.
Yeah, that one I think is one that Penn State fans are very hopeful that they would be able to land. But again, another deep position, especially even on his own team. So who are the other names to know when it comes to defensive end position?
So Jameel Lyons, from Roman Catholic in Philadelphia. I was listing him as a defensive tackle for the longest time. When he came here in the summertime, he was listed at about 245 pounds. And so then, what was that, almost a year ago? I was thinking, okay, he's going to keep growing. He's going to grow into a D tackle. And that's kind of why I was listing there. Well, he hasn't grown really at all since then. He's still pretty much 6'4, 245. And, if he's able to stay at that height and weight, that does work well for defensive end. So I've kind
Yeah.
of switched to more DN board now. He's actually announcing his top 5 like today. Like I think it's going to be around 8 p.m. Friday
Yes.
night. So we'll see with that. I firmly expect Penn State to be a serious player with him. I think maybe they might be the favorite right now. He's continuing to improve academically, which was really important, and that all bodes well for Penn State. So
One quick note: this is Jameel Lyons. So I'm if you're watching on YouTube, And I always strongly encourage you to watch on YouTube. I love our audio audience, but I can do more for you on YouTube by showing you the highlights, especially of football players playing football. Will Norman and Nittany Lions here, those were both guys from 2020. They only had their sophomore season highlights up. So especially Will Norman has gotten much bigger since the highlights you saw a little bit earlier. I just want to make that one note, so please continue with the rest of the board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Will Norman was just on campus too, not that long ago. I should have noted that earlier. But again, with Will, he's that's one's gonna drag out for a bit.
Yeah.
I think one guy I put in a RPM prediction for Mason Robinson not that long ago. I feel very good about where Penn State stands there. I'm expecting him to be back at State College here in just a couple of weeks. I believe it's April 9th is what he's planning for. So look, the Penn State's been as poorly as Penn State's done with St. Francis. They've done the exact opposite with McDonough, pretty much landing all the players that they want from that school. Of course, Kenny Sanders is a McDonough alum. He has very close ties there, and he's one of Penn State's key recruiters. So that's going well. I feel like Mason Robinson should be part of this class. So to me right now, I think Mason and Nittany Lions both make a lot of sense as being the two defensive ends in this class. And they could grow to three. Of course, they would absolutely find space for a Nicholas Harbor. I didn't mention Desmond Umazulu, who, man, his recruitment with Umazulu, he just blew up out of nowhere. And like, I'm trying to talk to people about it. And everyone's just like he needs space. Like, he's just like, I don't think he saw this all coming in such a rapid period of time. Desmond is supposed to be at the Baltimore Under Armour camp, which you and I are going to attend this weekend. So I'll be looking forward to hopefully, getting to introduce myself to him and have a good talk with him that weekend. But he's another guy. Him, Harbor, and maybe a Deshaun Womack would be another one. Mapui, they would maybe consider. Joseph Mapui, of course, is Nicholas Harbor's teammate down at Archbishop Carroll. But right now, for the most part, Lions, Mason Robinson, those are the guys I'm focused on here. Michael Kilbane, too. He was just on campus. I don't think he's quite a take at the moment, though. I think there's a few guys higher than him at the moment.
So how does, with all that in mind, and all those names we just went over, and all that film we just watched, the defensive line in general, I'm going to lump them in. How does Neo Avery and Matthias Barnwell factor into this group? Because those two that were athletes on the offensive side of the ball, we've had the conversation, Avery to defensive end and Barnwell to somewhere on the defensive line. Is that still the case with Barnwell? And that seems to be something that is kind of an evolving process. So I want to open up that to wherever. And how does that factor into the guys and the situations at the defensive line?
Yeah, happy you brought that up. That was a good point. I should have brought that up. So I'm kind of just looking at them still as athletes. And, Penn State always kind of like has an athlete scholarship or two that they kind of just keep. Like, I just imagine like a board, right? Like there's like an athlete like spot. Like that's how I'm kind of looking at them. And like, yes, they will factor into this, but because of how deep these two boards are, like I still think realistically, like they can add another 4 defensive linemen just because the talent's there. And it's such an important position, both defensive end and defensive tackle. So I've just kind of had them underneath the athlete mindset, or that's what my mindset is, I guess you would say. But, I mean, especially if this class continues to go on and, they're not able to add a lot of defensive tackles, or defensive ends even, but they add all these other positions, then it will have a big impact. But if they can land some of these guys here in the spring and summer, I still think that they would load up on both of these positions.
Yeah, and just the depth of that class and the guys, and also the quality of those players. I mean, Jason Moore, Will Norman kind of opened my eyes watching his film. LeBlanc, these are guys that can be difference-making defensive tackles. These are not just guys that are big and can grow into their frame. These are guys that can be special. And having a guy like Matthias Barnwell and Neo Avery already on the roster, it's just a fascinating look at when you say, and we'll get to linebackers here at the end of this sentence, when you say, take 2 running backs, take 3 linebackers, and you've got maybe 6 or 7 defensive linemen you want to take, I have a hard time with the idea that you're going to turn down any of these defensive linemen for any of those other positions, especially if you're coming down to a numbers crunch down at the end. So let's get to the linebacker position, because there's a lot of stuff, a lot of moving parts to me when it comes to the linebacker position. Where do you want to start? Do you want to start with the linebackers that are, that are the highlight guys, or the guys that are kind of where we're deciding which one is the take and not take?
Yeah. I think this board's pretty easy to figure out, to be very
Yeah.
frank. It's Tony Rojas and Tamir Robinson. They want them as outside linebackers, and then basically for an interior guy, if Josiah Trotter, Phil Picciotti, Jordan Hall are all takes basically, and
And
it's
it's
kind of just
one
how
to
it
me.
sorts itself out.
It's
Oh yeah, yeah.
it's
I don't.
one.
Yeah. Well, of course. I mean, you've been talking about how Manny Diaz likes to play. I mean, they're the inside linebacker is kind of dying off like the dinosaurs. Am I right with that, or is that a little
Yeah.
dramatic?
Well, they need the Mike linebacker. They need one Mike linebacker, but this is the conversation I really want to have about this because you're seeing here Tamir Robinson, who is the 3-level athlete. I mean, we've had the conversation that people want to keep calling him a defensive end just because the way his Brashear used him was to get after the quarterback. That doesn't mean that that's what he does. He also played safety. It was the first highlight. So he's got the ability to play 3 levels of the defense. That's a will to me. Then you got a guy here like Tony Rojas that is physically explosive. 210 pounds already. But if you're playing 3 safeties, how many linebackers do you need? Can you make Tamir Robinson a really good Mike linebacker that can play pass, coverage, blitz, do all of it? Do you need 3 linebackers? That's the other thing. Do you need to take 3? And well, you mentioned Jordan Hall, Trotter, and Picciotti. If these 2 are the 2, and then you're having a conversation about a true Mike, and that's what the other 3 are, you need more safeties if you're going to run a 3-safety defense. I don't know that you have the numbers to take 3, especially not 4 linebackers like some Penn State fans have been talking to me about of you need to get more linebackers, linebacker numbers. It's like if you're only playing 2 and you are committed to that, I don't see it.
Yeah. And that's really what James Franklin's going to have to figure out, right? Because how long is Manny Diaz going to be here? I mean, realistically, if he's here for more than 3 years, that's is he even going to coach these guys?
Yep.
I can see that answer being no. But with that said, I mean, Brent Pry played that defense a lot himself as well, and I think when you look at the star position and the way Franklin has transitioned some things over the years, I mean, they're definitely still moving in that direction. So yeah, it's going to be something that I really think that's just going to come down to James in the end. That's going to be his decision to make more than Manny or anybody else.
Yep, and that is you bring up a great point because that is the counterbalance of the argument of okay, so this 3-safety defense, but Manny Diaz runs it way more than Brent Pry did, and they're from the that's the whole conversation. They're from a similar system. They grew up with the same philosophies, but where they diverged was coming to Penn State. Brent Pry had a lot of options at linebacker, and this is what James Franklin said when I asked him about this, is you have access to, it's LBU, guys want to come here and play linebacker, so they've been recruiting 2 wills every year, and this is important. This is another thing he brought up is don't get it twisted. We're recruiting 2 will linebackers, and one of them plays Sam. And then we transition them over. And that's how the process goes. So the idea, again, of playing 3 linebackers, even in the context of Penn State playing 3 linebackers, they're really not recruiting 3 positions because the only guy that played that position as a senior was Cam Brown because you had Micah Parsons who took over that will position. Yeah. He was too good. You had to get him on the football field. So the progress of that kind of got a little bit topsy-turvy where you did that 1 year have that. So this position, if they can get these, and this is, I think you make a great point. If they can get 3 guys and they feel like these are the 3 best guys they can get, recruit 3 linebackers, and that's the beauty of defense. Sub-package, that 11th defender, it's whatever you want it to be.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing we don't really know, though, too, is just kind of where do some of those young guys stand as far as how they've advanced, right? I mean, I mean, Jamari Button looks good, but like, what is he showing them in practice? Because that's the other thing that comes into recruiting is like, sometimes it's not about the numbers. Sometimes it's what they're seeing in practice. And if they think that, I'm not going to use names because I don't think that's fair. And I apologize. I probably shouldn't even use Jamari there, to be honest. But, just if player X is not performing what they thought he was going to perform, well, then they're going to have to get somebody in because they think player X is not going to be here in 2 years.
Right.
So that's the other thing to always kind of keep in mind. It's just now, like with that said, I mean, and to be to Jamari and Kobe and Tyler Elson, like I think they're all progressing well. Like I've never heard really any like negative things that make me think like they're not going to be part of this program in a year from now. But that's just something that we see often with Penn State. Like honestly, like I think Penn State's going to have a massive offensive line class because they're worried about some of their depth at offensive line. I mean, I think that's going to be a massive part of it. So Yeah, and that's the other factor of how it plays all out.
So we're gonna extend this conversation, and just like the Sam Field linebacker conversation, we're gonna go with a guy that I think, just based on looking at him, maybe you could count him as a linebacker anyway, and that's Cam Seldon. Tell us a
Hmm.
little bit about this ginormous athlete that plays in the secondary.
Yeah, Cam's a stud, and I mean he's
Yes.
probably one of their. Oops, I tapped my mic there. He's probably one of their top 5 overall players in this class, and things are going really well for Penn State right now. I think they're really excited about the. I mean, put it this way, he doesn't have a lot of communication with coaches. He's not one of those guys who's doing calls every day, but like out of the coaches he is talking with, Penn State's in a good position there. So that's good to note. I mean, Cam's comes from a real small area in Eastville, Virginia. I mean, look at his field he's playing on
This
right
is,
now, right?
I'm
It
just
looks,
watching him
yeah,
go like 40, like he's accelerating to the
yeah.
point he's 40 yards ahead of everybody.
Yeah, yeah, he's I actually kind of would like to see one of these games in person, but then I'd want to leave like at the end of the second quarter, right? Because you're not going to get anything in the second half. But listen, I mean, we know we know Cam, excuse me, is going to Tennessee this weekend. So Tennessee seems to be emerging a little bit. He told me he's visited Tennessee before, which I did not know, and I'm still trying to confirm when he actually did. But I believe this is his second visit to Tennessee. Maryland, Virginia, and Wake Forest have also hosted him before, so he's been in a handful of schools. Penn State, of course, hosted him for the Auburn game, and I do expect him to get back to State College. It might have to wait until June for his official visit, though. But man, he's a stud of a player. Kenny Sanders is working really hard on him. I know that's Kenny's kind of like their X factor, right? Like they
Yeah.
have like a position coach who's always working on him, and of course Dex is a great recruiter himself. But whenever they put like Kenny working on some of these guys specifically, like that's usually because that guy's incredibly important. So I know Kenny and Dex are working hard on that tag team there. One other thing with Cam too is his cousin is Salim Wormley, so there is a family tie to Penn State as well.
With the rest of the secondary, I skipped over corner because I wanted to get to Seldon because I think he could be exactly that position that they
Hmm.
need. So even if they get both Rojas and they get Tamir Robinson at the linebacker position, Seldon can play at least 2, if not 3 safety positions for the Nittany Lions. So that's another one of those things in recruiting of like, and especially on defense, how you want to use players. I think he fits very nicely into that picture. So even if you do miss a guy like Rojas who's visiting Clemson, does that change anything there as well? You have multiple options, I think, if you look at it positionally with Seldon. So the rest of the safety position, who are the guys that
Yeah.
you're looking at?
Yeah, another deep board, man. Ramir Stewart, of course, he's a top guy in PA. Ramir's like not much has changed with Ramir. Like he's never been a guy who is incredibly active with his recruitment, and that really doesn't seem like a whole lot has changed right there. So, Texas A&M, Tennessee, West Virginia, they have all hosted him in the past. I have no idea when his next visit's going to be. I wish I had a better feel. He's just, it's just one of those guys who lays low and pops up at random schools at random times, I guess is the way to put that. So, Amari Snowden's another pretty important player, I think, for their safety board out of Roseville, Michigan. Mari was actually talking about maybe coming up here this weekend, but I think that's going to have to wait for a few more weeks from now. But he's really kind of taken off, and I think he'll be a player who's pretty high on Penn State's board when it's all said and done. Notre Dame's in the mix there; they're kind of stepping it up with him. Dakari Nelson too. I think Dakari Nelson is a very important player for Penn State. He might be maybe probably one of their top 3 safeties. I think Cam Seldon's definitely one, and then Nelson may actually be number 2 there. Man, this is the guy who drove 14 hours from Selma, Alabama, to watch the Penn State Rutgers game. I mean, salute, man.
I
That's an
remember that
incredible
story. I didn't
commitment
realize that was
there.
him.
Yeah, yeah, with little babies too, like siblings or sons. And I know somebody was saying like he came with like a couple toddlers, like imagine like a couple toddlers in a car for 14 hours. Oh, and then you show up and you watch that Penn State Rutgers game. There's like no scoring. It was cold and just like he's still really interested in Penn State. Like I don't know if that would have worked out if that was in my case at least. I can't do 2 hours in the car with my toddlers, let alone 14. But anyway, Penn State's firmly in the mix there. He went to Clemson not too long ago and picked up an offer from Clemson. And I think the Tigers are going to be a serious player there. But I'm watching Dakari for an official visit in the summer. Jaden Bonsu's starting to blow up out of St. Peter's Prep. I mean, his offer sheet is just incredible now with LSU, Georgia, Ohio State. I believe Texas is in there. There's a few other ones. I mean, he's really taking off. I know he's planning to go to Ohio State this weekend, and then I think he said he's going to do Texas and Alabama in mid-April. So he's taken off. Musa Kane, of course, is still in there too. Blair Academy prospect. So another guy's to keep an eye on. So this is another pretty deep board, man. I think defensive line. I really think, I mean, for the most part, every position but corner is
Yeah.
pretty deep, and there's a lot of talent. And corner has talent, but it's just all over the place. So
Yeah. Let's go down to
Is that a
Florida.
good transition?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's head down to Florida.
Yeah, that's what it is, man. For the most part, I mean, Antonio Cotman is from Virginia, of course, and I'm listing him as a corner for now. I see him kind of outgrowing that position. He's already like 6'2", 200.
Oh yeah.
Man, I'm not sure if that's gonna work long term. But everybody else is just all over the country, man. Antonio Robinson from Miami, Florida. Dijon Robinson from Tampa, Florida. Damon Fagans from Fort Lauderdale. He's from American Heritage. Is one of the guys.
Yeah.
I'm watching for a visit here in the coming weeks.
American Heritage especially. So I did a video breakdown for a previous site this summer on one of their former players, five-star safety, and James Williams, unreal football player. And I noticed Fagan as well in that secondary. This is a school that produces players in the secondary.
Yeah. I mean, dude, they produce everywhere. Like I think I think in their secondary, I think like what was it, like eight of their players were like already committed to like Power 5 schools, or like we're on the verge of that or something. When I was looking last year at maybe going to see Cam Miller play American Heritage, and it didn't work out with schedules and stuff like that. But I was trying to research how stacked that game would be, and I really wish I would have now because of Treyaun Webb, of course, who played with Cam. I kind of looking back, if I would have realized these American Heritage guys were so interested in Penn State as they were, and of course Treyon Webb, I really would have probably pursued that a little bit more. But anyway, I mean, two other guys too. Brady Marshall, I want to mention, Lake Mary, Florida. Daniel Harris from Miami, Florida. I mean, they are all over the place in the Sunshine State to try and find the guys. I mean, right now, I think Braden Marshall, makes a lot of sense. He's been to Penn State already, and he's aiming to take an official visit in June. I talked to him about that last week. Fans can learn more about that in the interview I did with him. I think Antonio Robinson has a lot of interest in Penn State as well. I think Penn State just kind of wants to see how he grows. They like to kind of just see lengthwise. He was here last summer, so maybe getting an opportunity to see him again and get accurate measurements will give us a better feel for that recruitment. But guys all over the country here. I mean, I didn't even mention Eddie Pleasant. He's from Tampa. Yeah. Tony Mitchell's a guy they like a lot. He's from Alabama. Damari Brown, of course, is another American Heritage guy. I mean, I have no idea who they're going to land at corner. And honestly, I think the staff obviously they have a better idea than I do, but I think that they also think like, this is going to be one of those years where, we're going to absolutely have to pluck somebody from down south because there's just nobody really else in the Mid-Atlantic region, which is why they're happy. They're very happy they got Lamont Payne, because if they didn't get him and they had to pluck two guys, that's never easy to do. So we will see how it plays out.
Yeah, and this would be the second year in a row they had to go get a guy from Florida with Cam Miller as well. So just to point out, it can be done. There is evidence of just last year in the class of 22 that Cam Miller, a key prospect in that class and a very talented player himself, also came from Florida. So it's not impossible. And
let me say one thing with that real quick. Like, it's official visits that make the difference there, which is why as of March 25th, I'm like I have no idea where to go, because like for all these guys, Keziah Holmes, Katron Allen, Cam Miller, the wide receiver, Dunmore, like all these Florida guys over the years, like we have really had no idea on, excuse me, we knew they were interested, but we didn't know to what degree until they took that official visit, which for most of them was the first time they were ever here. And then, we kind of got a feel after it. We're like, oh, wow, there's a really good relationship here. So I think by this time 3 months from now, by the end of June, I'll have a much better idea for that board, because a couple of these guys are going to come. Like I said, Braden Marshall will definitely be one, and I'm sure a couple others will too.
Well, if only we'd have gotten some information from you today on the show. I mean,
my wife's texting me. We got to get going. I got to get to Harrisburg so I can get to Vincent, get to Baltimore. So I'm a little behind right now, but we did a good show today. So
awesome job. Thanks for taking all of that time to break down the entire defensive side for Penn State football. I think, as I said before, really deep at some really key positions, and this could be a follow-up to 22 and that defensive line class especially that can help steer and change the trajectory for Penn State football, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So great conversation. Thanks for coming on the show, Ryan.
Every Friday. I love it. Let's do it again.
Every Friday. That'll do it today for the BWI Daily Edition. Monday, I can't believe I forgot to say this. We had a whole long conversation about linebackers. Abdul Carter's joining the show on Monday, 2022, 4-star linebacker. He was a fun interview because he is a super serious guy. He did the interview right after working out. He was in the gym, so you don't want to miss that. Coming up on Monday on the BWI Daily Edition. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. We'll talk to you then.